Admiral Zethkara pressed his scaled hand against the bridge window of his flagship, the Stellar Dawn. Outside, space burned with the light of dying ships. The blue energy beams from his fleet's weapons struck the enemy vessels, but the alien ships just absorbed the damage and kept coming. The Vex-High swarm had arrived in the Kepler 442 system 3 days ago. At first, the Galactic Defense Coalition thought they could handle them. After all, the Coalition had the best ships in known space. Their vessels used pure energy weapons that could cut through any armor. Their shields could stop almost any attack. Their computers could calculate battle strategies faster than any living mind. But the Vex-High were different. Their ships looked like giant insects made of metal and flesh. When Coalition energy beams hit them, the ships would change. Their hulls would adapt. After a few hits, the same weapons that once burned through their armor now barely left a mark. "Admiral, we've lost another squadron," reported Captain Veltara, his tactical officer. Her voice shook as she read the numbers from her screen. "The enemy has destroyed 60% of our fleet. Our weapons are becoming less effective with every attack." Zethkara watched as 3 more Coalition ships exploded in bright flashes. The Vex-High ships moved like living creatures, twisting and turning through space. They fired acid-green projectiles that ate through hull plating like it was paper. Worse still, when a Coalition ship was destroyed, the Vex-High would swarm over the wreckage. Within hours, new enemy ships would grow from the remains. "Sir, incoming transmission from Fleet Commander Raxton of the Nexus Republic," the communications officer announced. The holographic image of Fleet Commander Raxton appeared in front of Zethkara. The reptilian alien's usually proud bearing was broken. His ships burned behind him as he spoke. "Zethkara, my friend, we cannot win this battle. My energy cannons are useless now. The swarm adapts to everything we throw at them. We need to retreat while we still can." But Zethkara knew retreat was not an option. Behind them were 3 inhabited worlds with billions of innocent lives. If the Coalition fleet fled, those worlds would fall to the swarm. The Vex-High would consume every living thing and use the biomass to create more ships. "We cannot retreat, old friend. Too many lives depend on us holding this line." Raxton's image flickered as another explosion rocked his ship. "Then we die here and the swarm grows stronger. There has to be another way." Zethkara thought about the emergency protocols hidden deep in Coalition military computers. There were species on the outer edges of known space that the Coalition had contacted, but never formally allied with. Most were considered too primitive or too dangerous to include in galactic civilization. Among those species were the humans. The humans had only made contact with the galaxy 50 years ago. They came from a small blue world called Earth, far from the major trade routes. When Coalition scouts first met them, they were shocked by how backward human technology seemed. Humans still used chemical rockets to travel between planets. They fought wars with metal projectiles instead of energy weapons. Their computers were slow and bulky compared to advanced alien technology. Most Coalition members dismissed humans as a curiosity. Some trading companies bought human art and music, finding their culture interesting but primitive. The humans were allowed to join the Coalition as junior members, but they were never taken seriously in military matters. But Zethkara remembered something from the early contact reports. Human ships were built differently than Coalition vessels. Where alien ships were sleek and elegant, human ships were thick and angular. They were covered in heavy armor plating that seemed unnecessary when energy shields existed. Their weapons were crude kinetic cannons that fired solid metal projectiles. Coalition military experts had laughed at human battle tactics. Why use expensive metal bullets when energy beams were more efficient? Why build thick armor when shields were lighter and more effective? The humans seemed to be stuck in an ancient way of thinking about warfare. Now, as Zethkara watched his most advanced ships die helplessly, he wondered if the experts had been wrong. Another transmission came in from Captain Zilnara of the research vessel Scientific Progress. Her ship's sensors were more advanced than any military vessel. "Admiral, I've been studying the enemy adaptation process. The Vex-High ships change their molecular structure in response to energy-based attacks. Their cellular matrix can alter its composition to resist specific frequencies and energy types. But sir, there's something important. Their adaptation system is specifically designed for energy weapons. I don't see any mechanism for adapting to kinetic impacts or certain types of electromagnetic interference." The bridge fell silent as everyone processed this information. The enemy's greatest strength, their ability to adapt, might also be their weakness. They had evolved to counter the sophisticated energy weapons that dominated galactic warfare. But what if someone attacked them with something completely different? Communications, open an emergency channel to Earth Space Command, Zeth Kara ordered. His communications officer looked confused. Sir, the humans? Their response time across interstellar distances is much slower than ours. Even if they wanted to help, they couldn't get here in time. Do it anyway, Zeth Kara said firmly. Send them everything, our battle reports, sensor data, tactical analysis. Tell them the swarm cannot be stopped by conventional means. As the message was prepared, another wave of Vex-High ships emerged from the asteroid field where they had been breeding. These new vessels were larger than before, their hulls gleaming with the absorbed technology of destroyed Coalition ships. The final phase of the battle began, as the last Coalition ships formed a desperate defensive line. Energy weapons that had once been the pride of galactic civilization now barely scratched the enemy hulls. The Vex-High had adapted so completely that even the most powerful particle beams were absorbed harmlessly into their biomechanical flesh. Message sent to Earth, sir, the communications officer reported. But their nearest fleet is at least 3 days away if they even have ships available. 3 days. Zeth Kara knew they wouldn't last 3 hours at this rate. The Vex-High Queen ships had entered the battle, massive vessels that could spawn dozens of smaller attack craft. The Coalition's defensive line was crumbling. All ships, this is Admiral Zeth Kara. We will hold this position to our last breath. History will remember that we stood between civilization and the darkness. Fight well and die with honor. The response came from every surviving Coalition captain at once. For the Coalition, for the innocent, we stand with you, Admiral. As the final assault began, Zeth Kara looked once more at the message they had sent into the void toward Earth. It was their only hope, however slim. Perhaps the humans with their strange, primitive ways of war might see something that the most advanced military minds in the galaxy had missed. But for now, all they could do was fight and pray that someone, somewhere, would find a way to stop the endless hunger of the Vex-High swarm. 3 days passed like a nightmare. Admiral Zeth Kara's fleet was gone, scattered atoms drifting through space. The few survivors had escaped in damaged ships to spread word of the Coalition's defeat. The Vex-High swarm now controlled the entire Kepler 442 system. From his emergency command post on the mining station Gamma 7, Zeth Kara watched through long-range sensors as the enemy consolidated their victory. The swarm ships moved like a plague across space, consuming everything in their path. They had already begun the horrible process of transforming the system's inhabited worlds. The planet Kepler 442b had been home to 4 billion Altarian colonists just a week ago. Now its blue oceans were turning green with alien algae. Strange spires grew from its continents like infected wounds. The Vex-High were reshaping the entire world into a breeding ground for their species. Sir, we're receiving reports from across the Coalition, reported Lieutenant Kiksara, one of the few officers who had escaped with him. The swarm has launched simultaneous attacks on 12 other systems. Our fleets are falling everywhere. The enemy adapts too quickly for our weapons to remain effective. Zeth Kara studied the tactical displays with growing despair. Every Coalition battle followed the same pattern. Initial success with energy weapons, then rapid enemy adaptation, then total defeat. The Vex-High consumed the wreckage of each battle, growing stronger and more numerous. The worst part was watching the enemy's evolution in real time. Early Vex-High ships had been vulnerable to Coalition plasma cannons, but after consuming the remains of destroyed Coalition vessels, new swarm ships emerged with hulls that could absorb plasma energy and convert it into power for their own weapons. Similarly, ships that had been destroyed by particle beams spawned offspring with natural defenses against those same weapons. Any word from our message to Earth? Zeth Kara asked, though he knew the answer. Nothing, sir. It's been 3 days. Either they received our message and chose not to respond, or their technology is too slow to send a reply across such distances. Meanwhile, in the Sol system, the message from Admiral Zeth Kara had indeed arrived. It was received by the Deep Space Communications Array on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. Within hours, the complete battle data was being analyzed by Earth's top military scientists. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the war room deep beneath the Colorado mountains, studying holographic displays of the Vex-High attacks. Around her, Earth's best tactical minds worked frantically to understand what they were seeing. The alien ships adapt to energy-based weapons, explained Dr. James Morrison, head of Earth's Xenobiology Research Program. Their cellular structure can literally rewrite itself to resist specific types of energy attacks. It's the most advanced biological adaptation system we've ever encountered. What about their physical structure? Asked Colonel Maria Santos, head of weapons development. Are they adapting to kinetic impacts as well? Dr. Morrison pulled up detailed scans of HFY ship hulls. That's the interesting part. Their adaptation seems specifically evolved to counter energy weapons. Lasers, plasma cannons, particle beams, that sort of thing. But I don't see any mechanism for adapting to physical impacts or certain types of electromagnetic interference. Admiral Chen studied the data carefully. Earth's military had always been different from the rest of the galaxy. While other species had moved to pure energy weapons centuries ago, humans had kept developing kinetic weapons. Not because they couldn't build energy weapons, Earth had plenty of those too, but because human military doctrine emphasized redundancy and unpredictability. Show me their battle tactics, Chen ordered. The holographic display showed HFY ships swarming coalition vessels. The alien ships moved in organic patterns like schools of fish or flocks of birds. They concentrated their forces to overwhelm enemy positions, then spread out to consume the wreckage. They're pack hunters, observed General David Park, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They rely on numbers and adaptation, but what happens if they face something they can't adapt to? Dr. Morrison highlighted sections of the alien ship hulls. Based on these scans, their adaptation system is biological. It works by analyzing incoming energy signatures and restructuring their cellular matrix to resist them. But biological systems have limits. They can't adapt to certain types of electromagnetic pulses that disrupt neural activity, and they definitely can't adapt to pure kinetic force. You can't evolve your way out of physics. Admiral Chen turned to Colonel Santos. What do we have that these aliens haven't seen before? Santos smiled grimly. Everything, Admiral. Our railguns fire tungsten rods at significant fractions of light speed. Our missile systems use nuclear warheads, something the Coalition banned centuries ago. Our EMP weapons are designed to disrupt electronic systems, but they should work just as well on bioelectrical networks. Most importantly, we still use kinetic weapons as our primary ship armament. The Coalition thinks our weapons are primitive, added General Park, but primitive might be exactly what we need, Admiral. Chen walked over to a strategic display showing Earth's defensive fleets. The 3rd Expeditionary Fleet was currently on patrol near the edge of the system. 50 ships, all equipped with the kind of weapons that galactic civilization had abandoned long ago. The Coalition's message said they need help immediately. Chen said, "How fast can we get the 3rd Fleet to Kepler 442? 4 days using our latest jump drives," replied Captain Lisa Rodriguez, the fleet logistics coordinator. "But Admiral, that's 50 ships against thousands of enemy vessels. The Coalition had hundreds of advanced warships and they were completely destroyed." Chen studied the tactical data one more time. The HFY had adapted to energy weapons by analyzing their frequency and power signatures. But kinetic weapons didn't have frequencies to analyze. A tungsten rod moving at relativistic speeds was just a tungsten rod. There was no way to adapt to the laws of physics. "Prep the 3rd Fleet for immediate deployment," Chen ordered. "Full weapon loads with emphasis on kinetic penetrators and EMP warheads. And make sure every ship has full nuclear capability." "Nuclear weapons, Admiral?" asked Colonel Santos. "The Coalition specifically banned those after the Rigel incidents." "The Coalition banned them because they're too destructive for civilized warfare," Chen replied. "But we're not fighting a civilized enemy. We're fighting a biological weapon that consumes everything it touches. Sometimes you need to fight fire with fire." As Earth's military machine sprang into action, the scientists continued their analysis. The more they learned about HFY biology, the more confident they became that humanity's approach might work. Their adaptation is their greatest strength, Dr. Morrison explained to the assembled officers. But it's also a weakness. They've become so specialized in countering energy weapons that they might be completely vulnerable to kinetic attacks. It's like they've evolved to be immune to bullets by developing bulletproof skin, but never considered what happens if someone just hits them with a hammer instead. The 3rd Fleet launched 18 hours after receiving orders. 50 human warships accelerated away from Earth. their hulls black with radar-absorbing coating and bristling with weapons that the galaxy considered obsolete. Back in the Kepler 442 system, Admiral Zethkara received word that the last Coalition stronghold on the outer planets had fallen. The Vexhi now controlled everything. Soon they would have enough biomass to launch attacks on the core worlds of galactic civilization. He had given up hope of rescue. If it came at all, it would come too late. The swarm was too powerful, too adaptable, too numerous. Nothing in the known galaxy could stop them. But sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. The space around Kepler 442 had become a graveyard. Twisted metal from hundreds of Coalition ships drifted in slow orbits around the system's star. The Vexhi had consumed most of the wreckage, but some pieces were too small or too damaged to be worth their attention. Admiral Zethkara floated in the command center of his damaged flagship, the Stellar Dawn. Life support was failing and most of his crew was dead. Through the cracked viewports, he could see the green glow of Vexhi bioships as they patrolled their conquered territory. The enemy had grown fat on victory. Where once there had been hundreds of swarm ships, now there were thousands. The largest queen ships were the size of small moons, their hulls pulsing with organic light as they spawned new attack craft every few hours. "Sir, I'm detecting a spatial distortion," whispered Lieutenant Kixara from her damaged sensor station. "Something's coming out of hyperspace." Zethkara forced himself to look at the readings. His heart sank as he saw the energy signatures. Only 50 ships, and they were small. Probably another Coalition patrol that hadn't received the retreat order. "They would be destroyed in minutes just like all the others. Can we warn them?" he asked. "I'll try, sir, but our communications are badly damaged." The spatial tiers opened one by one, and ships began emerging from hyperspace. But these weren't Coalition vessels. The newcomers were built like metal fortresses, thick, angular, and covered in heavy armor plating. Their hulls were dark gray instead of the bright silver preferred by most galactic civilizations. "What are those?" Kixara whispered. "I've never seen ship designs like that." Zethkara studied the vessels through his damaged sensors. They were primitive-looking, with none of the elegant curves that marked advanced starship design. Instead of energy shields, they seemed to rely on pure physical armor. Their weapon ports housed crude kinetic cannons instead of refined energy beams. "Those are human ships," he said with growing realization. They actually came. The human fleet formed a tight battle formation as they advanced into the system. Their ships moved with mechanical precision, not the flowing grace of Coalition vessels. They looked like machines built for one purpose: war. The Vexhi Queen ships detected the new arrivals immediately. Biomechanical alarm calls echoed across their communication networks. Within minutes, thousands of swarm attack craft were converging on the human fleet. Zethkara managed to boost power to his communications array long enough to send a desperate warning. "Human vessels. This is Admiral Zethkara of the Coalition Defense Force. You are heavily outnumbered. The enemy adapts to all energy weapons. Retreat while you still can." The response came from the lead human ship. "Admiral Zethkara, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. We received your distress call. We're here to help." "Admiral Chen, you don't understand," Zethkara transmitted frantically. "The swarm has adaptive armor. Our most powerful weapons became useless within hours. You have only 50 ships against thousands of enemies." There was a pause. Then Admiral Chen's voice came back, and Zethkara could hear something in her tone that sounded almost like satisfaction. "Admiral, we've studied your battle reports. We understand the enemy's capabilities. We're counting on their adaptation system working exactly as you described." Before Zethkara could ask what she meant, the Vexhi attack began. The first wave of swarm ships came at the humans like a living tide. Hundreds of biomechanical vessels, each one larger than a human destroyer, converged from all directions. Their hulls gleamed with the absorbed technology of defeated Coalition fleets. The Vexhi opened fire with weapons they had learned from their previous victories. Plasma cannons copied from Altarian design sent streams of superheated gas toward the human ships. Particle beams stolen from Nexus Republic technology lanced through space with deadly precision. Energy torpedoes modeled after Coalition. Munitions spiraled toward their targets. The attack struck the human fleet and accomplished almost nothing. Plasma. Streams that could melt through Coalition. Energy shields splashed harmlessly against thick ablative armor. Particle beams that had torn through the finest galactic warships left only scorch marks on reinforced hull plating. Energy torpedoes that had destroyed entire squadrons exploded uselessly against physical barriers designed to absorb and dissipate energy. The human ships kept coming, their dark hulls glowing with heat but otherwise undamaged. Impossible, breathed Lieutenant Kixara. How are their ships surviving those attacks? Zethkara stared in amazement. The humans weren't using energy shields at all. Their ships were protected by layers of physical armor, ceramic plates, metal alloys, and ablative materials designed to absorb energy and spread it out over large areas. It was primitive by galactic standards, but it was also completely effective against the swarm's energy-based weapons. The Vex-High attack craft swarmed closer, their adaptive hulls already beginning to change in response to the energy signatures they were detecting from the human ships. But the changes were subtle, minor adjustments to resist the low-level energy emissions from human engines and systems. The swarm ships expected the humans to return fire with energy weapons. They were prepared to adapt to lasers, plasma cannons, and particle beams. Their biological systems were already restructuring to counter the anticipated attack patterns. Instead, the human fleet opened fire with weapons that had been obsolete for centuries. Railguns mounted along the sides of human warships accelerated tungsten rods to incredible velocities. These weren't energy weapons. They were simple metal projectiles moving at significant fractions of the speed of light. There was no energy signature to analyze, no frequency to adapt to. They were just pieces of metal moving very, very fast. The tungsten rods punched through Vex-High hulls like bullets through paper. The enemy's adaptive armor, evolved to counter energy attacks, offered no resistance to pure kinetic force. Alien ships that had shrugged off coalition plasma cannons were torn apart by what amounted to very fast bullets. But the humans weren't finished. Missile batteries opened across the human fleet, launching warheads that the galaxy had banned centuries earlier. Nuclear weapons detonated among the Vex-High formations with apocalyptic fury. The primitive bombs released more energy in seconds than most coalition ships could generate in hours. The swarm ships closest to the explosions were simply vaporized. Those farther away found their bioelectrical systems overwhelmed by electromagnetic pulses that their adaptation couldn't counter. The EMP effect disrupted the neural networks that controlled their adaptation process, leaving them helpless and confused. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communications channel, calm and professional. All ships continue firing. Target the larger vessels. Don't give them time to adapt. But adaptation was exactly what the Vex-High couldn't do. Their biological systems had evolved to counter sophisticated energy weapons by analyzing and responding to specific frequencies and power signatures. They had no mechanism for adapting to kinetic impacts or electromagnetic interference. A tungsten rod moving at relativistic speeds was just a tungsten rod. There was no way to evolve immunity to the laws of physics. A nuclear explosion was just a release of energy and radiation on a scale that organic systems couldn't process or counter. The human fleet advanced steadily through the chaos, their ugly, primitive ships cutting through the most feared enemy in galactic history, like it was target practice. Zethkara watched in stunned silence as the tide of battle turned completely in a matter of minutes. The swarm that had seemed unstoppable was being systematically destroyed by weapons that galactic civilization had abandoned long ago. By the ancestors, whispered Lieutenant Kixara. They're winning. The humans are actually winning. The largest Vex-High Queen ships tried to retreat, their massive hulls glowing as they prepared to jump to hyperspace. But human missile salvos caught them before they could escape. Nuclear fire bloomed like tiny stars as the breeding ships died, taking with them the future generations of the swarm. Admiral Chen's voice crackled over the communication channel one more time. Admiral Zethkara, the system is secure. We're sending rescue ships to your position. Sorry we're late. It took us a while to get here. As human search and rescue vessels moved through the wreckage looking for coalition survivors, Zethkara could only stare in wonder at what he had witnessed. The most advanced military minds in the galaxy had been helpless against the Vex-High swarm. But humanity, with their crude weapons and primitive tactics, had ended the threat in less than 20 minutes. Sometimes, he realized the old ways were the best ways. The human fleet moved through the Kepler 442 system like a mechanical storm. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching her tactical displays as her ships engaged the Vex-High swarm with devastating efficiency. What the coalition had failed to do in days of fighting, humanity accomplished in minutes. The first wave of swarm attack craft was already drifting debris. Their biomechanical hulls, so perfectly adapted to resist energy weapons, had been torn apart by simple tungsten projectiles moving at incredible speeds. The enemy's greatest strength had become meaningless against weapons that didn't rely on energy signatures. "Admiral, we're detecting massive movement from the inner system," reported Commander Jackson Hayes, her tactical officer. "It looks like the main swarm fleet is mobilizing." Chen studied the sensor readings. Thousands of HFY ships were emerging from the asteroid field where they had been feeding on Coalition wreckage. These weren't the smaller attack craft they had just destroyed. These were the full-size swarm vessels, bioships the size of Coalition cruisers, their hulls gleaming with absorbed technology. Among them moved the Queen ships, massive living vessels that served as mobile breeding centers for the swarm. Each one was several kilometers long, their surfaces crawling with organic growth chambers that could spawn dozens of attack craft every hour. "They're adapting their formation," Hayes observed. "The smaller ships are spreading out to minimize splash damage from nuclear weapons. The larger vessels are hanging back, probably analyzing our attack patterns." Chen nodded. The HFY were intelligent, even if their adaptation system couldn't counter human weapons. They were learning from the first engagement, adjusting their tactics to account for humanity's unexpected capabilities, but they still didn't understand what they were really facing. "All ships, prepare for Phase 2, Chen ordered. "Deploy electromagnetic pulse missiles on my mark." Across the human fleet, missile tubes opened and weapons that had been banned by Galactic Convention for centuries prepared to launch. EMP warheads were considered too cruel for civilized warfare because they could disable an enemy ship's life support systems. But the HFY weren't civilized, and they weren't using artificial life support. The main swarm fleet approached in a complex three-dimensional formation designed to minimize losses from area effect weapons. Their bioships moved in organic patterns, weaving through space like a school of predators. As they closed the distance, their hulls began to shift and change. The adaptation process was visible to human sensors. HFY ship hulls were restructuring themselves, thickening against kinetic impacts. The enemy had analyzed the tungsten rod attacks and was developing countermeasures. "Sir, the enemy ships are growing additional armor layers," Hayes reported. "They're adapting to our kinetic weapons." "Let them," Chen replied calmly. "Fire EMP missiles full spread." 100 electromagnetic pulse warheads launched from the human fleet, their simple chemical propulsion systems accelerating them toward the swarm formation. The HFY point defense systems opened fire, biomechanical cannons spitting acid-green projectiles to intercept the incoming missiles. Most of the EMP warheads were destroyed before reaching their targets. But a few got through, and that was enough. The warheads detonated in brilliant flashes of electromagnetic energy. The pulses swept through the swarm formation like invisible lightning, and the effect was immediate and catastrophic. HFY ships that had been adapting their hulls to resist kinetic weapons suddenly went dark. Their bioelectrical systems, the neural networks that controlled everything from movement to adaptation, were completely disrupted by the electromagnetic interference. The enemy ships didn't explode or break apart. They simply stopped working. Massive biovessels that had been weaving through space moments before now drifted helplessly. Their organic control systems fried by electromagnetic energy they had no defense against. "All ships, follow up with kinetic bombardment," Chen ordered. "Target the disabled vessels." Human railguns spoke again, sending streams of tungsten projectiles into the helpless enemy ships. Without their adaptation systems functioning, the HFY hulls were as vulnerable as any ordinary armor. The metal rods punched through their biological plating and tore apart the delicate organic systems inside. But the human fleet wasn't finished demonstrating the power of primitive warfare. "Nuclear missiles? Prepare for deployment," Chen commanded. "Target the Queen ships." The massive HFY breeding vessels had been hanging back, trying to stay out of direct combat while their spawn engaged the human fleet. But they were also the most important targets. Destroy the Queens, and the swarm couldn't reproduce. Nuclear-tipped missiles launched from every human ship, their primitive guidance systems locked onto the largest enemy vessels. The Queen ships tried to evade, their massive hulls glowing as biomechanical engines pushed them through space. But they were too large and too slow. The first nuclear warhead struck a Queen ship amidships. The explosion was visible from the other side of the system. a miniature star blooming against the darkness of space. The blast vaporized half the enemy vessel instantly, while radiation and heat finished off the rest. More nuclear fires followed, as missile after missile found its target. Queen ships that had taken centuries to grow were destroyed in seconds, their biomechanical hulls unable to withstand the fundamental forces unleashed by atomic fission. Commander Hayes stared at his displays in amazement. "Admiral, we've destroyed over 3,000 enemy vessels in 17 minutes. The remaining swarm ships are trying to retreat." Chen studied the tactical situation. Scattered groups of Vex-High ships were indeed trying to flee the system, their formations broken and their numbers decimated. The few survivors were broadcasting what could only be distress calls, high-pitched biomechanical screams that echoed across space. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Vex-High swarm was running away. Let them go, Chen decided. They'll spread the word to the rest of the swarm. Maybe it will make the next encounter easier. As the last Vex-High ships disappeared into hyperspace, the human fleet surveyed their victory. The space around Kepler 442 was littered with the remains of what had once been the most feared enemy in known space. Biomechanical wreckage drifted everywhere, the organic hulls already beginning to decay without their neural systems to sustain them. "Damage report," Chen requested. "Minor hull scoring on 3 vessels," Hayes replied. "No casualties. The swarm's energy weapons were completely ineffective against our armor plating." Chen allowed herself a small smile. The battle had gone exactly as Earth's military scientists had predicted. The Vex-High adaptation system, so perfect for countering energy-based attacks, was completely useless against kinetic weapons and electromagnetic interference. "Open a channel to Admiral Sethkara," she ordered. The holographic image of the Coalition Admiral appeared on the bridge. He looked exhausted and confused, his scales pale from shock. Behind him, human rescue teams were helping Coalition survivors aboard medical ships. "Admiral Chen," Sethkara said slowly, "I don't understand what just happened. Your ships, your weapons. How did you do this?" Chen considered how to explain it simply. "Admiral, your people evolved beyond kinetic weapons centuries ago. You developed sophisticated energy-based systems that were more efficient and elegant, but efficiency isn't always the same as effectiveness." She gestured to the tactical display showing the debris field. "The Vex-High evolved to counter your advanced weapons. Their adaptation system was perfect for dealing with energy attacks, but they never encountered anything like our approach to warfare. Your weapons are so primitive," Sethkara said, shaking his head. "Metal projectiles, chemical explosives, electromagnetic pulses. These are technologies that most civilizations abandon early in their development." "That's exactly why they worked," Chen explained. "Sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective one. You can't adapt your way out of physics, Admiral. A piece of metal moving fast enough will punch through any armor, no matter how sophisticated. A nuclear explosion releases energy on a scale that biological systems can't process or counter." The Coalition Admiral was quiet for a long moment, processing what he had witnessed. "The galaxy owes humanity a great debt," he finally said. "The swarm was spreading to other systems. If you hadn't stopped them here—" "We'll worry about the politics later," Chen interrupted. "Right now, we need to help your survivors and make sure the system is secure. But Admiral, I want you to send a message to the Coalition Council. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that sometimes the old ways are the best ways." As rescue operations continued and the human fleet secured the system, word of the victory began to spread across the galaxy. The Vex-High swarm, unstoppable for so long, had been defeated by weapons that galactic civilization considered obsolete. The age of energy-based warfare was ending. The age of human military doctrine was about to begin, and across the galaxy, the Vex-High swarm retreated into the darkness, carrying with them a new and terrible knowledge. There were some enemies that could not be adapted to, some weapons that could not be countered, and some species that were far more dangerous than they appeared. Humanity had just announced its arrival as a galactic military power in the most decisive way possible. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, the galaxy was a very different place. Admiral Sethkara stood in the Great Council Chamber on Nexus Prime, addressing representatives from every major civilization in known space. The circular amphitheater was packed with delegates from hundreds of worlds, all of them wanting to hear his report on the human military capabilities. "Honorable delegates," Seth Kara began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. I stand before you as one who witnessed the impossible. The Vexhai swarm, which had defeated our combined fleets and threatened to consume all organic life, was completely destroyed in less than 20 minutes by a human force 1/10 our size. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Even months later, many still found it hard to believe. How? Demanded Ambassador Krellnox of the Rigel Confederacy. Our energy weapons are the most advanced in the galaxy. Our shields can stop any known projectile. How did primitive human technology succeed where we failed? Zethkara activated the holographic display in the center of the chamber. Images of the battle appeared, showing human ships firing crude kinetic weapons at Vexhai vessels. The answer is that we made a fundamental error in our approach to warfare. We assumed that more advanced meant more effective. We developed elegant energy weapons and sophisticated defensive systems, but we forgot the basic principles of physics. The display showed tungsten rods punching through Vexhai hulls like paper. The swarm's adaptation system was designed to counter energy-based attacks. When faced with simple kinetic projectiles, they had no defense. Their biological systems couldn't evolve immunity to pieces of metal moving at high velocity. Ambassador Silvera from the Andromedan Trade Union stood up. But surely this was just luck. One enemy that happened to be vulnerable to primitive weapons? I thought so too, Zethkara admitted. Until I studied human military doctrine more carefully. The display changed to show schematics of human warships. Unlike the sleek designs favored by galactic civilization, human vessels were blocky and heavily armored. Humans never abandoned kinetic weapons because they never saw them as primitive. They saw them as reliable. Their military philosophy is based on redundancy and unpredictability. They use energy weapons, kinetic weapons, chemical explosives, electromagnetic warfare, nuclear devices, and biological agents. They prepare for every type of enemy. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. While we specialized in elegant solutions, humans maintained diverse arsenals. While we sought efficiency, they sought effectiveness. The result is that they can counter any enemy, even ones we cannot touch. On Earth, Admiral Sarah Chen was having a very different kind of meeting. She sat in the Pentagon briefing room with Earth's top military leaders, reviewing reports from across human space. The galactic response has been exactly what we predicted, reported General Park. Every major civilization is requesting military cooperation agreements. They want to learn our weapons technology and tactical doctrines. What about the Vexhai? Chen asked. Colonel Santos pulled up stellar maps showing the galactic rim. Complete retreat to the outer darkness. Our intelligence suggests they're avoiding any system with a human presence. The survivors from Kepler 442 apparently spread word that humans are too dangerous to engage. Dr. Morrison, who had helped analyze the swarm's weaknesses, added his perspective. We're tracking Vexhai movement patterns across known space. They're not just avoiding human ships. They're avoiding any system where human weapons technology has been deployed. The psychological impact has been enormous. Chen studied the reports with satisfaction. Earth's gamble had paid off completely. By maintaining weapons that other civilizations considered obsolete, humanity had developed the perfect counter to the galaxy's most dangerous enemy. What's our diplomatic status? She asked. The Coalition has offered us full membership with permanent seats on the Defense Council, General Park replied. The Nexus Republic wants to establish a joint military academy. Even the isolationist Zenith Empire has opened formal diplomatic channels. But the most significant changes were happening on the battlefield itself. Across Coalition space, military engineers were reverse engineering human weapon systems. Kinetic cannons were being installed on energy weapon platforms. Nuclear arsenals banned for centuries were quietly being rebuilt. The elegant age of energy warfare was ending, replaced by the brutal effectiveness of human military doctrine. Ambassador Elena Vasquez, Earth's new representative to the Galactic Council, was learning this firsthand as she toured a Coalition shipyard orbiting the industrial world of Vega 7. This is our newest design, explained Chief Engineer Thoxara, a proud Altarian who had spent his career building graceful energy weapon platforms. We call it the Unity-class hybrid cruiser. The ship under construction was unlike anything in Coalition history. Its hull combined the flowing lines of traditional alien design with the angular armor plating of human warships. Energy cannon ports shared space with kinetic railgun mounts. We've integrated human kinetic systems with our own energy weapons, Thaxara continued. The result is a vessel that can adapt to any enemy. If our energy weapons prove ineffective, we switch to kinetic bombardment. If shields stop our projectiles, we use electromagnetic pulse weapons. Vasquez nodded approvingly. The human approach to warfare is all about options. Never depend on a single system or strategy. Exactly what Admiral Chen told us during the technology transfer sessions. She said that the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't expect. The tour continued to the weapons testing range, where coalition engineers were experimenting with nuclear warheads. The devices were crude by human standards but devastating compared to traditional energy weapons. We had forgotten how much raw power these primitive explosives can generate, Thaxara admitted. A single nuclear device releases more energy than our largest plasma cannons. It seems obvious now, but we had become so focused on precision that we lost sight of pure destructive capability. Meanwhile, in the depths of space beyond the galactic rim, the Vex-High swarm was learning its own lessons. The few queen ships that had survived the human assault had retreated to the darkest regions of the void, where they slowly rebuilt their forces, but they rebuilt differently. The new generation of Vex-High bioships incorporated changes based on their encounter with humanity. Their hulls were thicker, designed to absorb kinetic impacts. Their neural systems were shielded against electromagnetic interference. Some even incorporated primitive radioactive materials to build resistance against nuclear weapons. Yet even as they adapted, the swarm leadership knew they had been fundamentally changed by their encounter with humanity. For the first time in their species' history, they had met an enemy they couldn't simply evolve to counter. Humans didn't rely on predictable energy signatures or consistent tactical doctrines. They used whatever worked, changing their approach based on each specific enemy. The Vex-High had evolved to be the perfect predators of galactic civilization. But humanity wasn't part of that civilization when it developed its military doctrine. Humans had learned to fight on a world where survival meant adapting to any threat, using any weapon, winning at any cost. Back on Nexus Prime, Admiral Zethkara concluded his presentation to the Galactic Council with words that would echo through history. Honored delegates, we believed that advanced meant sophisticated. We thought that efficient meant effective. The humans have taught us that sometimes the simplest solution is the most powerful one. Sometimes the oldest weapon is the most deadly. He paused, looking around the chamber at representatives from civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. The age of elegant warfare is over. The humans have shown us that survival requires not sophistication, but adaptability. Not efficiency, but effectiveness. Not one perfect weapon, but an arsenal of imperfect ones that together can counter any threat. The Council voted unanimously to adopt human military doctrine as the new galactic standard. Kinetic weapons, electromagnetic warfare, nuclear arsenals, and chemical explosives were no longer considered primitive. They were considered essential, and throughout known space, a new saying began to spread among military officers of every species. When facing the impossible enemy, don't ask what the most advanced solution is. Ask what the human solution is. The galaxy had learned a simple lesson that would shape warfare for generations to come. Sometimes the best way to win is to hit the enemy with something they never expected. Something old, something simple. Something that works. Something human. As Admiral Chen had told the Coalition Defense Council during the post-battle briefings, we didn't defeat the Vex-High with superior technology. We defeated them with superior thinking. While you evolved beyond kinetic weapons, we kept them because they work. While you banned nuclear weapons, we kept them because they're effective. While you sought the perfect solution, we prepared for the imperfect enemy. The universe is a dangerous place, she had concluded. The species that survives isn't the most advanced or the most elegant. It's the one that's ready for anything. And now, thanks to humanity's example, the entire galaxy was learning to be ready for anything.